Yes, this is the first lesson in the environmental movement, so I have a pen, paper for some notes. We're going to be watching a video to take notes on also, and at the end of this lesson, we'll be writing a paragraph on how we can see the effects of the environmental movement in our day-to-day lives. So the causes of the environmental movement. At the end of World War II, many people were stopping to look around to see how we're treating other people for the civil rights movement. Why are we fighting wars in anti-war in the Vietnam and Korean War? And the industrial boom during the war efforts is what the environmentalists were looking at, because that caused environmental damage, using up some of our natural resources, and they were adamant on keeping it pure and limiting that. But the environmentalists did not gain any ground until the end of the civil rights era in the late 60s, early 70s. When the movement was formed, they got their first National Earth Day on April 22nd, 1970, and this amassed several marches and rallies to help spread the awareness of the damage the factories are causing and their smog. The issues that were brought up during the post-World War II economic boom was that which many people have more time to pay attention to the quality of life problems, such as the anti-war, keeping everyone safe, and also the civil rights movement, as well as the environmental. This movement was formed, but the major events and campaigns didn't start till the first National Earth Day. This holiday was gained credibility for the movement when the presidency of Nixon was involved. And Nixon formed the first Environmental Protection Agency in 1970 and signed many environmental protection laws. Other common presidencies that were involved with the environmental movement were Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George Bush, W. Bush, Barack Obama, Gerald Ford, and Ronald Reagan. They've all signed off on environmental protection, preservations, funding, and being a social movement with others around them during a major movement time gained them even more credibility, because there were many movements were piggybacking off of each other, going the women's rights, the anti-war, civil rights, and the environmental. With the support of other groups, they got to pass laws that they couldn't have done by themselves to help preserve the ecosystem and the planet. And this National Earth Day was celebrated by many environmentalists, and we can see it today in schools when teachers talk about it to kids in elementary classes. So right now we're going to watch a video, and we're going to take notes on the environmental movement. This is going to see what the common student thought and how their reaction was to the environmental movement, and how the government wasn't doing that much to it.
We began to see more and more environmental problems around the globe in the 50s and 60s and going into the 70s. As there was economic growth in countries all around the world, people were taking natural resources and transforming those resources into products that they wanted. And in the process of transforming trees into furniture and homes and so on, you cut down forests. In the process of creating energy, you burned coal to generate electricity, and you put pollutants into the sky. It was commonly believed that the only way to protect the environment was to have the government step in and make up for the mistakes of the marketplace, what was considered market failure. And it was interesting in this period of time, almost every economics book that dealt with environmental issues was under the impression that the source of environmental degradation, environmental problems in the world, was basically the profit system. That people and businessmen and corporations and their desire to make profits at the lowest possible cost to themselves, they would create pollutants, and then they would dump these pollutants into the skies, into the rivers, and so on. The opposite side of that, the flip side of that, was that it was believed that because markets were characterized by pollution, what were called negative externalities, the solution to this may well lie in the Soviet countries, because it was assumed that in the Soviet countries that industry is run for the good of all the people, good for the nation, and that you would look into these Soviet countries and you would find very little pollution. You would find sort of an environmental heaven. In the 70s, people began to look behind the Iron Curtain, and they were horrified. Economist after economist saw that there were some of the worst environmental problems on the planet, that there were far worse problems than they had in the United States or in Western Europe. And that was sort of a perplexing problem for a lot of people. And you tie that in when the same period, in the late 60s, you had had large numbers of students around the world, young people, who decided that they wanted to protect the planet. It became very, very, very fashionable. Student revolution with the student uprising and so on in the late 60s, the anti-war movement, the hundreds of thousands of students that were marching down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., they were all carrying their red flags, and they had Chairman Mao's little red book. And they knew that capitalism was evil, it was destroying the planet, and we had to get rid of capitalism. And not too long after that, the war in Vietnam ended. But it was interesting that all these young kids then, who had sort of been radicalized and were sort of anti-free market, anti-capitalism, anti-profit system, anti-private property rights, kept on marching. Except what they did, they switched their Bible. Instead of holding up Chairman Mao's little red book, they were holding up Rachel Carson's little green book. Because they had much the same philosophy. The belief was capitalism did not care about the planet, and lots of these kids, it was just a simple flip from them, from marching for Chairman Mao to marching for the Greens. That was the origin of the environmental movement, that whole period. And this also brought about the birth of what was called Earth Day. The first Earth Day was held on April 22nd, 1970, Earth Day 1. Coincidentally or not, that happens to be Lenin's birthday. And I knew lots of the young kids who were marching at that time, and they thought that was funny. They thought that was a joke. They thought that was an in-your-face kind of thing, because that fit in with their whole philosophy, that we'd celebrate Earth Day on Lenin's birthday because we knew it was capitalism that was destroying the environment.
All right. So in that video, we see how many kids were uprising from their schools and marching for environmental goodness. It's not like even though they believed that capitalism was evil, it wasn't. Capitalism was evil. It's still, communism was not the answer. We see the effects today through the numerous skyscrapers in Seattle and Chicago. They're using reusable energy, and these skyscrapers are being built all over the country. They're starting in major cities. We see major car companies like Toyota, Chevy, and Tesla, one of the new upcoming bigger ones. They have full electric cars. You have the Prius, Chevy Volt, and all the Tesla models. They all use electric energy to help stop the usage of gasoline and oil, even though there's starting to become a shortage. And also manufacturing companies all over the country and all over the world are also using more eco-friendly machines that don't require as much oil power, and they're trying to prevent the use of smog and prevent the use and cause of smog into the sky. So right now we're going to take 15-20 minutes, or to the rest of this class time, we're going to write a paragraph about the environmental movement and how this affects everyone and how we can also see it today.